Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. We've got a Necrons video for you today, and of course it's been dictated by the polls, which is dictated by you guys. So thank you very much for voting on the poll so far. We are going to continue with the questions kind of format rather than a refresher review. I think it's working out just fine, and I'm a little bit more interested in that, something I haven't quite done to death, if you know what I mean. So let's get a random comment from the previous video, which was the Necron Warriors. Shout out goes to no, that's not how you say that. Dio-Sku9. I might have butchered that. There's probably a hidden meaning there, I don't know. But yeah, 20 warriors with a Royal Warden and Chronomancer with Illuminazares. So that's their combination that they like to use. So the Royal Warden to fall back and shoot, fall back and charge, Chronomancer for stealth and the move after shoot ability, and Illuminazares for a +1 to the AP and a -1 to the AP. Great combination. So shout out to you. I'm not going to go for the name again. Right, the poll this time was for the following. So there was an Overlord with the Translocation Shroud. We had a Ghost Arc, Transcendent Catan, and Cryptothralls. Now, it looked like the Transcendent Catan was going to win, so I started preparing this morning for the Transcendent Catan's video. Turns out it didn't win, so I've had to prepare another video. The Overlord with the Translocation Shroud won by a single percent, 34% to 33%. So we're going with the Overlord with the Translocation Shroud today. Right, so we're looking at one of our infantry characters. He's got the Translocation Shroud, quite a new model. He's coming in at 85 points, which we'll kind of find out if that's fair by the end of the video. So, first question, him or the Overlord, the standard Overlord, which we all know, love, hate, whatever. Which one is best, in my opinion? I'll go through some of the key similarities and differences first, because they're very similar. They've both got My Will Be Done to reduce the cost of a stratagem by 1. They both carry a Resurrection Orb most of the time. I mean, the normal Overlord sometimes doesn't with attacking arrow and so on, but most of the time you are taking the Resurrection Orbs. Both lead the same units, which we'll go over in a bit, and virtually have the same keywords. However, the differences are the Shrouded Overlord. I'm going to call it the Shrouded Overlord. I think that's the easier way of saying it. He gives you an auto advance of 6 inches, and you can do that through terrain, through any enemy models, in fact, and so on. Whereas the standard Overlord doesn't have this. Instead, he's got a -1 to his damage, and it's just his damage, not his unit's damage. Also, the standard Overlord has war gear selection, so a little bit more flexibility, such as attacking arrow, as we mentioned, or the Void Scythe, which is pretty cool. Whereas the Translocation Shrouded Overlord, he can only take the Overlord's blade. He's only got one loadout, and that is it. However, all being said, I think I prefer the Shrouded Overlord over the standard Overlord, especially if you plan on advancing the unit that he's going with. -1 to damage is nice, but I think it's less useful when he's buried within the unit. So speaking of units, what's the best unit for your Translocation Overlord, Shrouded Overlord? I keep getting that wrong, don't I? That's going to happen throughout the video. What's the best unit for him to lead? He's got 3 different options here with Immortals, Warriors and Lich Guard. So the first one we'll talk about is Immortals, which I actually think is the best option for him. So I'm going to start off with the best here. If you're equipped in with the Tesla Carbines, they've got Assault, which marries up very nicely when you're going to be advancing with your Translocation Shrouded Overlord. Mouthful that, isn't it? What a tongue twister. Yeah, it just goes together quite nicely because you're going to be moving 5 inches with the unit. You're then going to auto-advance another 6. That makes 11. You're then going to fire, which is great. 11 inches and firing. So that's going to give you a nice threat range there. Pair this with a Chronomancer, which you can also do. You're going to have an extra 5-inch move on top of that after shooting, so you can duck back into cover even, or take 5 inches more forward, go in onto an objective or something. And then that even gives you a -1 to be hit as well, which is kind of cool, which is what Chronomancer does. So that's a whopping 16 inches of movement whilst still firing. Yeah, that's quite a lot. That's quite a lot for infantry models. Now with the Ghost Blasters that they can also be equipped with, not as useful because they don't have the Assault keyword. I mean, you can put the Assault keyword on in the Awakened Dynasty with the Protocol of Sunstorm, which will be free. We'll talk about that later in this video. But yeah, I think it works better with the assault weapons though. Now before moving away from the Immortals, it's probably worth mentioning that you're going to be more likely to use stratagems on the Immortals as opposed to the other units, in my opinion, because Immortals dish out a fair bit of damage with their weapons in comparison to like Necron Warriors or your Lich Guard. Warriors, they're option 2. Sometimes they are good to advance because you're going to get a lot of models up the battlefield. There's going to be a lot of OC in the no man's land on objectives. Could be one objective, could be 2 objectives if you've got the footprint correct. The Resurrection Orb is also quite handy for a unit like that because they're going to get to re-roll that Reanimation Protocols roll if you wanted to with their numbers as Legion. So yeah, if you want to just have board control, then the Warriors are a decent option. They're a decent option. Then lastly, the Lich Guard, you're probably going to be going with the Swords and Shields, as most people do. Advancing them is okay early rounds because you're not going to be within engagement range, so you may as well go for the 5-inch movement, the 6-inch advance, get onto a no man's land objective, get your shields out, bunker down, and hope to be scoring primaries on that objective for as long as physically possible. They can still fight back in melee, of course, with their hyperphase swords, and they're pretty decent, so that's not too bad. In fact, the Lich Guard also offer another line of defense, not just their invulnerable save with the shields, but also the Guardian's Protocols ability that they have because you've now got a noble in the unit. So strength 6 onwards is going to be a -1 to wound against your Overlord unit, which is pretty cool. Now the War Scythe option is less commonly used. They're a bit too fragile for me. There's no invulnerable save, you can't take a Technomancer in there, you can't take Orokin the Diviner with them. So there's not really a way to make them more durable. So for me, you would go with the Swords and Shields with the Lich Guard. But out of the 3 units to lead, I would definitely go with the Necron Immortals. So why is the Shroud useful? Why the Shroud is useful? Question mark. Getting spaces quick is pretty good with all 3 of those units that we mentioned. We do have other units in the Codex, such as Canoptic Wraiths that are moving quite quickly, or Tomb Blades that are pretty quick. They've got the speed, but they sometimes lack the OC, especially if your opponent's got a lot of models on that objective. Even though, say, the Wraiths, for example, can be resilient and hold up a fight, they might not be holding the objective, which kind of defeats the purpose of putting them there. Having a 20-man warrior brick, for example, that's 40 OC potentially, plus the characters, of course. Putting them into the no man's land nice and early could be a great play. So that kind of makes the Translocation Shroud pretty useful. Getting them up the battlefield nice and early, and saying to your opponent, if you want the no man's land objectives, you've got to clear this unit. You're forcing your opponent's hand. Maybe there's a Catan on the left flank, there's some Doomsday Arcs on the right flank, maybe the Silent King's running up there somewhere. That's the targets your opponent wants to deal with, but instead they've got to deal with these warriors that they're not the most resilient, but they can keep popping up with certain stratagems and abilities. So you're forcing your opponent's hand, which is pretty cool. Also useful for the Immortals because they've only got a 24-inch range with their weapons, especially the Tesla again. So if you're moving them up 5 inches, then you're advancing 6 inches. That adds 11 inches of threat range to your Immortals, giving them a grand total of 35 inches of threat range. If you want to know more about threat ranges and how that works on a basic level, check this video out now. Is it that way or is it that way? I always get it mixed up. Whatever side it is, I'll put a little picture to show you which video it is for threat range. Yeah, and the last thing, moving through terrain and enemy models may also assist in some situations as well. Which detachment suits this Overlord with the Shroud? Which detachment? I mean, you've got plenty to work with here. You've got pretty much all the detachments apart from the Annihilation Legion, and you could even argue one of the stratagems will work fine as well with the 5+ criticals, but I wouldn't say it's its best suit. And even though I played the Hypercrypt Legion, I also would dismiss that as well, even though the reduction of CP cost on stratagems is good. I think you're better off taking Imotech in that situation because the Shrouded Overlord is all about movement, and the Hypercrypt Legion kind of does it all for you, so you don't necessarily need this advanced move when you've got Cosmic Precision stuff. So I'm going to go with the 3 today, which is the first one is the Obeisance Phalanx. Of course, he's got the Overlord keyword, so he's going to interact with that ability, Worthy Foes, +1 to wound against a selected unit. That's fantastic. It's got a few gems in that detachment as well, one of which being the Eternal Conqueror enhancement, so you're going to give full re-rolls of hit rolls to your unit. So imagine that with your Necron Immortals now. If full re-rolls to hit, Oh, the unit's got to be on an objective, of course, but if they're on an objective, full rerolls to hit, full rerolls to wound, potentially a +1 to wound on top of that if they've been selected for worthy foes. Tongue twisted yet again. The second one was the Awakened Dynasty. A nice simple +1 to the hit roll for your unit. That works with pretty much any unit that he leads. Pop the Veil of Darkness, I think, is a good strategy for 20 points, and you can teleport, again, your Immortals straight into the action, straight into range. Could be a Lich Guard for a 9-inch charge if you wanted to, or your Warriors just to throw a lot of OC out there. Not as useful in the long run, well, in the short run, in the long run, because he wants to be advancing, so you're not going to be able to advance with the Veil of Darkness, but it is one of those options. There's also the Protocol of Eternal Revenant, which is you can bring him back up when he dies with 3 wounds remaining. We'll speak more about the stratagems later on in a bit, but that's just one of the cool ones from the Awakened Dynasty. Then the third option is the Canoptic Core. Now you will need to have a Cryptek within the same unit in order to gain the advantages from this detachment for your Overlord with Translocation Shroud. So let's say, for example, you did take the Chronomancer. All of a sudden, you could have the Power Matrix unlocked, so your reroll and hit rolls are 1, potentially all your hit rolls. Again, that could be your Immortals there. Could be your Warriors, lethal hits. It's pretty decent. You've got the Dimensional Sanctum Enhancement, which gives them Infiltration. Infiltration on Warriors is probably pretty cool. Getting them straight in there. Then do they need to advance? They could advance and get straight into the enemy deployment zone, like very early doors. That could be kind of a cool strategy. But I would rather keep that back for Canoptic Wraiths, personally, because they're a bit more resilient, they're not going to go down as quick. But from the 3, I think the Awakened Dynasty is the most competitive out of the 3, and the Obeisance Phalanx is probably the weakest, but if you're playing a bit more casual, then it's probably the most fun out of the 3. What's the best use of the My Will Be Done ability that he has in his datasheet? Now, you probably can see a little Locust Destroyer in there on the image, and you're probably wondering, what the hell has that got to do with My Will Be Done? Let me explain a little trick I like to do. So, the Protocol of Vengeful Stars, which is one of the Awakened Dynasty stratagems, what you can do with that stratagem is, well, let's explain what the stratagem is first. If a unit within 6 inches of your character gets destroyed in your opponent's shooting phase, then if your character's unit can fire at that unit that destroyed your unit as if it was your shooting phase. So why that relates to the Locust Destroyer is what I like to do is get a single lone Locust Destroyer for 30 points, put him in front of my unit and let him get shot. Make sure you're within 24-inch range though, because otherwise you're not going to be shooting, you're not eligible. But if you're within 24-inch range, you're going to get basically a turn of shooting for free. Well, it's not for free. You're paying 30 points plus 1 CP. Normally 2 CP, but it will go down to 1 with Mine Will Be Done. But you will murder more than 30 points worth. You will take out a lot. Again, if they're on an objective as well, you've got a +1 to the hit roll with the Awakened Dynasty as well. You've got the re-rollable wound rolls. You're going to be taking out a lot more than 30 points. So it's going to be a great sacrifice, a great investment, if you like, for that Locust Destroyer to go. And some opponents will see this coming, but you can quite easily bait a lot of players into, take that guy out because he's going to score if you don't. Another one I like to do is the Enslaved Artifice stratagem from the Obeisance Phalanx. This one basically gives you 5+ critical hit rolls, which means you do not need a Plasmancer. It pretty much does what the Plasmancer does, so instead you take the Chronomancer, but have the Plasmancer's main ability, 5+ critical hit rolls. On your Tesla Carbines with Sustained Hits 2, on your lethal hits with your Gauss Blasters, your Gauss Flare Arrays, your Gauss Reapers, and so on. So it saves you from having to spend points on a Plasmancer. You instead reinvest it on a Chronomancer. You're going to get the -1 to hit. You're going to get the extra movement. All works well. Lovely jubbly. And another one for you from the Canoptic Court. Again, you need a Cryptek to be doing this. So you've probably got a Chronomancer in there. You've got the Solar Pulse stratagem. So it basically ignores cover. Ignoring cover is good because there's a lot of cover at the moment with the terrain layouts that are being provided by the mission pack from the Prior Nexus decks. Prior Nexus mission packs, not decks. And yeah, there's a lot of terrain. Cover's very easy to get nowadays. So if you're removing cover for free, because it's normally 1 CP, but it'll go to being free, That's not bad. I mean, it's not going to work with your Tesla carbines against power armor because they don't get cover. Power armor, 3+ armor doesn't get cover saves against an OAP weapon. Can't go to a 2+. But if you're shooting up against, I don't know, some gaunts that normally have a 5+, going down to a 4+ because of cover, that's a bit of annoyance. That's an annoyance because they've got half a chance of saving the model. But if you ignore that for 1 CP, which is now free, that's great. There's also a few from the core rules as well, some stratagems there. Command reroll for free is nice. We all like a command reroll time to time. You've got the free use of an Overwatch stratagem via Overwatch for your shooty battle line units. I like to use a little bit of Overwatch, as you guys may know if you watch the battle reports. I do love a little Overwatch or two. Or Insane Bravery, that sometimes comes in handy too. So there's a few from the core rules that you can make use with your Overlord's Marvel with Done ability. What I want you guys to do though, when you go on to the next poll, if you can, put a question in the comments as well on those polls. Comment a question, so it may actually come up, and I may also shout you out for that question too. So yeah, guys, check out the next poll, and I'll see you in the next one.